too proudly claimed that Finland won its war against the Soviets in 1944. That is like a boxer getting knocked out cold in the third round and then bragging that at least he still has his shorts on. Ukraine, the country that screams, Russia bad, Russia evil, Russia must die, is now literally funding Russia's war effort against itself. The truth is, Ursula was not fighting Russian jammers, she was fighting irrelevance. Hello and welcome to Global News Factory. I'm your host, Vikrant. Putin just hit a gold mine at the SCO Summit in China. A summit the West hoped would be a meaningless photo op turned into their nightmare. Billions in defense and energy deals signed with Delhi and Beijing. The so-called ostracized Russia, the one NATO said was crippled, it just walked out of Tianjin with long-term contracts that will pump billions into its economy for decades. Let's start with the monster deal with China. Russia and China have officially signed a legally binding deal for the long-delayed Power of Siberia 2 gas pipeline. Now, this is not some vague handshake agreement. It is on paper, signed, sealed, and bulletproof. Now, this pipeline will move gas reserves from West Siberia to northern China via eastern Mongolia. Once operational, it will supply 50 billion cubic meters of gas every single year. Not for 5 years, not for 10 years, but for 30 years straight. 3 decades. 3 decades of revenue for Russia. Imagine that. 30 years of energy security for China. 30 years of partnership that cuts Europe completely out of the picture. The EU thought it could kill Russia by banning gas. They cut themselves off from cheap, steady Russian supplies and went running to America begging for overpriced LNG. Meanwhile, China simply stepped in, erased Brussels' leverage and said, "Don't worry, Vladimir, we will take that gas." And that is why Europe is scared of China, not because of some naval base in the South China Sea, but because Beijing can do in one stroke that NATO cannot: secure Russia's economy. Now let's move to the bombshell deal with India. Russia has dispatched a team of observers to India, a team of experts. Their mission: prepare the ground for joint production of the Sukhoi 57 fifth generation fighter jet. Yes, the same stealth jet that was in a head-to-head race with America's F-35. India was courted by Washington aggressively. Trump wanted India locked into the American F-35, but after his tariff tantrums and hypocrisy over Russian oil, Delhi slammed the door on Washington. India chose Moscow. The numbers? India will purchase 3 to 4 squadrons, that is more than 60 jets. Add to that India's request for advanced Russian air defense systems. Not just S-400, but also the S-500. We are talking about tens of billions of dollars in contracts. A direct injection into Russia's defense industry, the same industry the West claimed was starved by sanctions. And here is the beauty. It is not some charity, it is not one-sided. China secures its energy future at stable low prices. India secures its skies with the most advanced jets and air defense systems. And Russia secures a steady stream of money and influence for decades. That is what real cooperation looks like, not the bullying, not the imposed compliance that Washington pushes through NATO. But equal partners, equal deals that benefit all sides. Equal is the key word here. And that is why, my friends, BRICS is the future, because the West runs on blackmail, while BRICS runs on mutual gains. Equal partners. So, let's take stock. Russia signs a 30-year pipeline deal with China, that is energy security for Beijing, money for Moscow, and a permanent wedge against Europe's gas dreams. Russia lays the foundation for a 60 plus jet deal with India and in air defense systems worth billions. And you have Delhi locking itself even deeper into Moscow's orbit. This is not isolation. This is not collapse. This is resurgence. The EU elites thought sanctions were a knockout punch. America thought tariffs would bully India. And NATO thought arming Ukraine would drain Russia dry. Instead, Putin just showed the world that Russia does not need Europe. It does not need NATO. It has China, India, BRICS, and a future that looks stronger than anything the West can offer. In the West, it is left holding overpriced American gas, overpriced American weapons, and a shrinking economy and shrinking grip on global power. The SCO Summit was not just another meeting, it was a warning, a reminder the center of global power has already shifted east. Moving on. What kind of fantasy world is Finland's president, Alexander Stubb, living in? And more importantly, what is he smoking nowadays? Because clearly, it is pretty strong stuff. In his grand interview with The Economist, Stubb proudly claimed that Finland won its war against the Soviets in 1944. Really? Won? That is like a boxer getting knocked out cold in the third round and then bragging that at least he still has his shorts on. And now let's look at the facts. The Winter War of 1939 and 40, followed by the Continuation War, ended with Finland losing nearly a tenth of its area. Whole regions were gone. Karelia lost, Petsamo gone, Vyborg gone. Finland also had to pay war reparations, accept Soviet security terms, and demilitarize parts of its land. Some victory, right? If that is a win, then surrender must be the gold medal, right? Stubb's genius argument is, we preserved our independence. Well, yes, but only after accepting every Soviet demand. It was not some heroic win, it was Finland saying, fine, take the land, take the reparations, just don't invade further. That is survival, not victory. And let's not forget, Finland was not some innocent bystander back then. It teamed up with Nazi Germany. The Soviets were alarmed that they could together commit atrocities against the Soviet population. And that is why Moscow launched its campaign, because it feared that Nazi troops could pour into the USSR through Finnish land. Security concerns, plain and simple. It was security concerns that triggered the invasion. But of course, the West loves a fairy tale. They twist history to fit their propaganda. For them, the Finland won narrative is convenient. They want to sell it as a parallel to Ukraine. Look, tiny Finland fought big bad Russia and survived. So Ukraine, you can pull off the same. It is motivational fiction, a bedtime story for Kiev. But truth? Finland only survived by surrendering to Soviet terms. Ukraine is not even being given that option today because NATO wants to keep the war alive. The West does not mention how Finland had to kick out its Nazi allies, pay billions in reparations, and forever adjust its foreign policy to Soviet red lines. So what is Stubb doing here? Simple. He is whitewashing history to paint Russia as a land-hungry empire and Ukraine as a modern-day Finland. It is a lazy comparison designed to brainwash Western voters into backing endless military aid. But anyone with half a brain knows Russia's actions in Ukraine, just like in Finland back then, come from security concerns spurred by NATO's expansion, NATO's actions, aggressive actions. So no, Stu, Finland did not win. At best, Finland crawled out of a burning house, but alive. That is not victory, that is barely survival. Moving on, this is one of those stories that sounds like a bad joke, but it is actually real. Ukraine, the country that screams, Russia bad, Russia evil, Russia must die, is now literally funding Russia's war effort against itself. Sounds weird because I am using Navarro's logic here, Peter Navarro's logic. So, how is Ukraine funding Russia's war against Ukraine? By buying diesel from India. Now, here is the twist. That diesel is refined from Russian crude oil. Yes, Kyiv is powering its tanks, trucks, and artillery with fuel that starts its journey in Russian oil wells. The same Russia they are supposedly fighting. Numbers don't lie. In the month of July, India supplied 15.5% of Ukraine's total diesel imports. That is more than any other country. The shipments are not even hidden. They go through the Danube from Romania and some through Turkey. So the point is, trucks in Ukraine roll because Indian refiners churn Russian oil into cheap diesel and sell it to Kyiv. Slowly and steadily, India is building an energy chokehold over Ukraine. Think about it. Diesel is not just fuel, diesel is war. Without it, tanks do not move, supply convoys do not deliver ammo. A single shortage can cripple the battlefield in days, and if India becomes the biggest supplier, then Kyiv's survival will quietly depend on Delhi. That means Ukraine has basically walked into India's trap. One day, Modi can turn off the tap. Imagine that chaos. It would not take long for Russia to roll in once Ukraine's diesel pumps run dry. And here is where it gets more interesting. Modi is already pushing his peace mission in Ukraine. Both Zelensky and Putin are going to be in Delhi here in the coming weeks. Suddenly, India has leverage over both the parties. Ukraine needs India for diesel. Russia needs India to keep buying its crude, which means Modi is the guy in the room who can pick up the phone and say behave or no fuel for you. The West cannot match this. Brussels cannot, Washington cannot, NATO cannot. They all gave Ukraine weapons, but not energy. They cannot cover the giant diesel hole Kyiv now faces. India filled that gap. And now, without even firing a shot, Modi might emerge as the quiet kingmaker in the war. Let's see what happens. The irony here is brutal. Ukraine thought the West would save it. Instead, it is getting cornered into depending on a country that is openly buying Russian oil and openly refusing to isolate Moscow. That is not just funny, it is geopolitical poetry. Moving on to our last story of the day. For several hours, Western media was buzzing with damning stories. Russian jamming, they screamed. And then, plot twist. Flight Radar 24, the very service that tracks flights in real time, calmly checked the data and said, relax, nothing happened. The plane carrying the EU Commission Queen had good GPS signal the entire way. Not a single blackout. The only hiccup, it landed 9 minutes late. That is it. 9 minutes. Not 1 hour of holding pattern, no Soviet-style mystery, no Cold War thriller, just 9 boring minutes. So basically, the whole Russia jammed Ursula's flight story was cooked like a cheap stew at a Brussels canteen. The Financial Times and their mysterious unnamed sources just threw in some extra masala for the West's anti-Russia obsession. Here comes the funniest part. Ursula, the same woman who cried wolf, claiming her jet was bugged and jammed, hopped right back into the same plane to escape Bulgaria. Yes, the haunted aircraft she was allegedly terrified of became her Uber home. If this is not clown behavior, what is? The truth is, Ursula was not fighting Russian jammers, she was fighting irrelevance. With Europe slipping into energy crises, farmers revolting, and her Ukraine policy collapsing, she desperately needs a headline to remind the world she still exists. So she invented a new villain story. I survived Russian GPS terror. Except she did not, because the data does not lie. The only thing that got jammed was her credibility.
Russia's brutal war against Ukraine is now in its fourth year. Putin is a predator. Putin's proxies have been targeting our societies for years.
That is all for now. Thank you very much for being with me. You're watching GNF.
Tell me all your dreams align. Sign me up and tell me about the